He was terrific and unique. He was one of the first players actually to come out of Africa that was a big success.
When you talk about Eusebio, you talk about Benfica. And when you talk about Benfica, you talk about Eusebio. He's the biggest name in the club's history, and the only living myth I'm privileged to know.
He was a sensational athlete, so strong and so fast. You'll have to wait another generation for a player with Eusebio's ability to appear again.
I'm just happy with everything I've achieved. My will to win was very important, but I can never forget my teammates, nor the shirt of my club, Benfica.
In May 1961, Benfica beat Barcelona 3-2 in Bern to become the first club apart from Real Madrid to win the European Cup. Even then, the Portuguese club were looking to the future, having just signed an unknown 19-year-old from Mozambique by the name of Eusebio da Silva Ferreira.
When Eusebio arrived, Benfica were Portuguese champions and European champions. Back then, we were already the biggest club in Portugal.
A month later, the European champions were invited to play an exhibition match against the world club champions Santos. The Brazilian side, with Pelé in their ranks, brought the Portuguese back to earth. With 20 minutes to go and 5-0 down, it seemed like a good time to give the youngster his chance. Eusebio took it with both hands, scoring a sensational second-half hat-trick.
They couldn't believe it. No one knew me back then. I actually thought Santos looked a very slow team, so I thought if I could nick the ball off them, dribble at pace and shoot whenever I could, I'd score. And that's what happened. I got 3 goals.
Benfica went down 6-3, but in just 20 minutes, Eusebio had shown the world his star quality.
Pelé asked me after the game, "Who's that black guy who scored 3 goals in 20 minutes? He'll be some player." And I think that's the historic moment when the world woke up to a new talent, to the new Pelé. I think that moment, that day, tells the story of a great player and above all a great man who blessed this country with his exceptional talent.
The shockwaves ran through the Benfica team. They were European champions, but every one of that lineup felt Eusebio's impact. His arrival meant that things would change.
Our first impression of Eusebio was one of fear. We talked amongst ourselves, who's going to make way for him? He was obviously an exceptional player.
I said, I don't care if they're European champions or not. I'm going to get in that team. I didn't say I was the best player, but I said I would play in that side.
All of us there, including me, who were lucky enough to hear him say it, then said to each other, either this is a great player or someone so full of himself that he thinks he's a great player.
Eusebio was right to believe in himself. His first league start came at the Stadium of Light against Atletico. And for those who hadn't seen the phenomenon put 3 goals past Santos, Eusebio showed the Lisbon public just what kind of player they had at Benfica.
I never got nervous. I just loved playing the game. I'd respect my opponent, but I'd like to go out there showing that I wanted to win, that I wanted to score. I made my debut here and scored 3 goals. It was fabulous because it was the beginning of my professional career.
Lisbon was a world away from the one that he'd known growing up in the Portuguese colony of Mozambique. But Eusebio settled at Benfica surprisingly easily. His childhood friend Hilario had been one of the first Mozambicans to make the trip to Portugal when he signed for the Lisbon club Sporting.
We arrived totally unknown. The first ever pitch I played on was in Portugal. As in Mozambique, it was just dust tracks. Even things like boots and balls, everything was different.
In fact, the history of Portuguese football was very nearly different. Hilario came close to bringing Eusebio from the Mozambican capital of Lourenço Marques to Sporting Lisbon.
At that time, I spoke to the president of Sporting. I know a kid from my neighbourhood who you could sign. The president said, "No, I won't sign him. He can come and have a trial." And I told Eusebio he could have a trial. But he said, "No, I'm not going to have a trial because I'm better than the best player at Sporting."
Sporting's loss was Benfica's gain, and Eusebio's reputation quickly spread. In his first season, his goals fired the club to a second successive European Cup final. Their opponents this time were Real Madrid.
I remember that I didn't sleep well the night before the game. And then on the day I remember looking at Di Stefano, Puskas and Hento, players I'd heard so much about and was curious to see.
Back in Africa, we'd always dreamed about playing against Real Madrid. We'd heard of them, winners of the European Cup. And then, of course, they had Di Stefano, my hero.
Benfica had already broken Real Madrid's monopoly on the European Cup. Now they were aiming to create another European era.
Madrid had won 5 European Cups. We'd come to the end of our era, and it was the time for new teams. That's normal.
Madrid started brightly, however, Ferenc Puskas giving them a 2-goal lead. Benfica hit back to level the game at 2-2. Then Real Madrid retook the lead. It was time for Eusebio to make his mark on his first European Cup final.
Eusebio just had supernatural speed. It's like cars. They used to have 5 gears, then they suddenly got 6 gears. Eusebio generally played in 5th, but when he needed to, he could always find another gear.
A searing run past Alfredo Di Stefano on the right wing resulted in Eusebio being upended by Pashin and a penalty given. There was never any doubt as to who would take it. The young Mozambican's power was simply too much for Madrid's ageing stars.
He wasn't technically amazing, but he had a fantastic shot and was so explosive, so fast.
Eusebio sealed the 5-3 win with a flourish as Benfica became the first team to beat the Spaniards in a European final. Eusebio, however, was more thrilled to receive Di Stefano's shirt after the game. Was Di Stefano, the undisputed king of European football, handing on the mantle to Eusebio?
At the end of the game, he gave me his shirt, so once we'd won the game and we'd won the European Cup, the important thing for me was the shirt.
That win brought about a new kind of fame for the young boy from Mozambique.
I never felt famous. Back then I was just a kid who was 17, 18.
He may not have sought fame, but Eusebio quickly established himself as the brightest star in both Portuguese and European football. In many ways, he was the first modern footballer, combining a devastating blend of power and acceleration. Then there was that fearsome shot.
I think Eusebio added a little bit of everything to the team. But mainly it was his combination of skill and raw pace. He wasn't just a great player, but a great athlete too.
He was so good that a bad pass to him would be reported as a good pass in the press the next day. Sometimes I'd give him a really poor ball, but he'd get it under control so easily and so often score that the papers would then report how Eusebio scored after another good assist from Graça. And I'd made a mess of the pass.
He was cat-like in the way he played, so fast and imaginative. To get past his marker, he'd show incredible strength.
I remember the first time I ever played against him, you know. I thought, what a fantastic player, you know, so fast and had this desire when he got near the box, he had to finish it off with a shot.
I'd mark the defence. They thought they were marking me, but no, I'd be marking them because I was a lot quicker than any of them. When Simoes got the ball, he knew where I'd go, play the ball into space, and I'd run onto it and score.
Naturally, Eusebio's goals brought trophies for Benfica. They won consecutive league titles between 63 and 65, and it was also in that year that Eusebio received the Ballon d'Or, confirming his status as Europe's top player.
Fortunately, I came to be considered one of the best players in the world and one of the best goal scorers in the world. I did everything that a player could ever wish to do.
Eusebio's goals had bulldozed Benfica to a third consecutive European final in 1963, but the Lisbon club were not about to create a dynasty of Real Madrid proportions. Their opponents were AC Milan, and despite Eusebio's opening goal, Benfica's attacking football met its match against Italian defence. Milan won 2-1.
Knowing that we were up against teams who played that Italian style of football, I think we should have been a little more rational and cooler in our thinking, and less gung-ho. But we're Latin people, and we were more focused on the fantasy and spectacle of the game, rather than the cold, calculating style of the Italians.
In 1965, Benfica reached their fourth final in 5 years, but this time they were beaten by Inter Milan 1-0.
I think they were technically better than us, even though they were down to 10 men. Back then you didn't have substitutes. When their goalkeeper got injured, one of their defenders had to go in goal. And we only won 1-0. Playing at home with a man advantage, and we were only able to win 1-0. That shows just what a team they were.
For all Benfica's dominance in the early 60s, just 2 European Cup wins was disappointing.
I think we could have won 1 or 2 more European Cups, because our generation were more than good enough to do that.
Nevertheless, Portuguese football was on the up. Sporting had won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 1964, and players from both Lisbon teams made the bulk of Portugal's squad for the 1966 World Cup in England. And in Eusebio, they had the man to lead them to glory.
We had a winning spirit, as the majority of Portugal's players played for Benfica. When we walked out onto the pitch, we were there to win and destroy our opponents. And that's what we did.
It was surprising, though, to see Eusebio without his usual number 8 or 10. It was traditional for Portugal to draw lots for their shirt numbers.
We were in the hotel and the draw was made. I picked out the number 13 shirt while Eusebio got the number 11, the shirt I've always worn and loved. So I made the following offer to him. I said, Eusebio, imagine wearing the number 13 and becoming the tournament's top scorer. Imagine the mystique that would create around the number 13 shirt. But I was only doing that because I wanted to wear the number 11, my normal shirt. So that's how it was. I ended up with my beloved number 11, and he went on to become the top scorer in the World Cup, wearing the number 13 that was originally mine. I'll never forget that.
It was a tough group for Portugal. After convincing wins against Hungary and Bulgaria, they had to face the world champions, Brazil.
I told my teammates that we're going to win because we're a good side. We're better than good. We're better than Brazil. They were one of the worst national teams I've ever seen.
Brazil were not the same force as the side that had won consecutive World Cups in 1958 and 62. But the way in which Portugal brushed them aside displayed a ruthlessness that surprised many observers. 2 goals from Eusebio, who else, and 1 from Simoes sent the champions crashing out. Next up for Portugal, the quarter-finals and a game against the tournament's surprise package, North Korea. Eusebio, though, was at the peak of his powers.
One of his greatest performances probably was in England in '66, when they were 3-0 down to Korea. They got into a 3-0 lead, and I don't think they could believe it, the Koreans, and then suddenly they got one goal, and he then wanted the ball all the time, and he just ran over them. Really, it was one of the best performances, an individual performance you'll ever see. Really, he was marvellous.
I said, if we can pull back just 1 or 2 goals in the first half, then we'll win the game. And we managed it. I scored 2 goals. So the first half finished 3-2 to Korea. 7 minutes into the second half, I made it 3-3. And on the hour mark, I made it 4-3. It was one of my best ever games in a Portugal shirt.
With Eusebio in inspired form, Portugal looked unstoppable, but they were up against the hosts England in the semi-final. Eusebio and his teammates were relaxed and confident of another win.
You're not afraid?
Não tens medo?
Não tenho, não.
That semi-final proved to be quite controversial. Portugal's base, Liverpool, was the original venue for their semi-final against the hosts. But the English FA arranged for the fixture to be moved to Wembley. It was a decision that left the Portuguese feeling cheated.
England bought that semi-final against Portugal. The game should have been played in Liverpool, but it was played at Wembley.
After their gruelling quarter-final against North Korea, a hasty journey to London was hardly the ideal preparation for Portugal. Eusebio in particular was struggling to impose his usual game on the English.
We're talking about a semi-final here, about a game where Eusebio wasn't at his best physically. He was tired, all of us were. And then he was marked by Nobby Stiles, who knew just how important Eusebio was to us.
Stiles' uncompromising marking drastically reduced the threat of Eusebio. By stopping Eusebio, England had stopped Portugal.
They didn't let Eusebio play, and Eusebio couldn't find his usual inspiration to get away from his marker, which in turn gave us less chance of winning the game.
2 Bobby Charlton goals gave England a 2-0 lead. With the English dominant on their home ground, tired Portuguese legs just couldn't cope.
I think that if we'd played in Liverpool, we would have beaten England. Even today, I believe that wholeheartedly.
A late Eusebio penalty was too little, too late. For Portugal, the dream was over.
It was really sad. When we lost, I looked to the sky and said, Lord, what have I done to deserve this? And that's when the tears came.
The fact remained, though, that Eusebio had now carried his country, as well as his club, to new heights. He finished the tournament with 9 goals to his name and had put Portugal on the world football map.
He was the tournament's top scorer, and he was the best player at the World Cup. No doubt about it. I'm not just saying that because he was my teammate, and I like the guy, but it's true.
Back with Benfica, the goals continued to flow. He received the European Golden Boot after an incredible 42 goals in 1968. It was becoming very obvious just how important he was to his club's chances of success.
With Eusebio in the side, we could win the European Cup. Without him, we couldn't win the Portuguese league.
In Europe, Benfica were still a force to be reckoned with. A Eusebio goal in their European Cup semi-final against Juventus gave the Portuguese a fifth European final in under a decade. Benfica's opponents were Manchester United. For Eusebio, that meant another encounter against his midfield nemesis, Nobby Stiles.
Eusebio had to be marked. You just couldn't afford to let him wander and roam all over the field like he wanted to do. And Nobby Stiles was given that job. And I don't think that Eusebio actually played against a person like Nobby Stiles very often. And he was just terrific. He nullified it.
Stiles was a very tough marker and hard to shake off. Eusebio would often talk about it. He'd say to us, "It'll be hard to get rid of Stiles, so the rest of you will have to do all the running."
I wasn't fit against Manchester United because if I'd been fit, I'd have scored. In the first half, I hit the bar. If I'd been fit, I wouldn't have hit the bar. It would have been a goal.
Like the Real Madrid side they beat in 1962, Benfica were past their peak. For 90 minutes they matched their opponents though, Jaime Graça cancelling out Bobby Charlton's opening goal.
Eusebio gave me a lot of titles over the years, but the one he never gave me was the European Cup. And he was a player who scored goals from every possible angle, but in this case, he missed when it was almost impossible to.
With just seconds remaining, Eusebio missed this chance to give his side the title. His response was typically gentlemanly, but Manchester United ran out 4-1 winners in extra time. Another chance of European glory had passed Benfica by, and yet again it was defeat for Eusebio at Wembley.
I scored goals there but never won a game. The only stadium where I've scored and never won.
In the early 70s, Eusebio's hunger for goals never diminished. Another European Golden Boot was testament to that. But having remained loyal to Benfica for 15 years, he decided to grasp one final payday in the burgeoning North American Soccer League.
When I went to the US, I earned in a year what I'd have earned at Benfica in 3 or 4 years. And it wasn't even a year, more like 5 or 6 months.
He was an instant success playing in Boston and then moving to Canada, where he captained the Toronto Metro's Croatia in the 1976 Soccer Bowl to win the NASL title.
Crossing and there's a goal! Eusebio, a header.
We were champions in Canada. We were champions of the NASL. And I was captain of the side just as I had been in Boston.
Goals and trophies were never far away from Eusebio throughout his glittering career, but his body could no longer keep up. A long-term knee injury forced him to retire in 1978. But it's here at Benfica's Stadium of Light where Eusebio will forever be cherished. The unveiling of a statue outside Lisbon's Sporting Cathedral confirmed his status in Portugal as a living legend.
When God decides that my days are up, I hope that my funeral procession will stop in front of my statue, make its way around the stadium before going into the stadium. Because I know that a lot of people will come here on that day. But I really hope that day's not anytime soon. I really hope to live a few more years yet.
Yet it's for his football that Eusebio will live long in the memory. For Benfica, he scored 638 goals in 614 games, winning 11 Portuguese championships, 5 Portuguese Cups, and 1 European Cup in just 14 years. Portugal's greatest ever player also scored 41 times in 64 appearances for his country. Eusebio da Silva Ferreira. There will never be another like him.